Today we hear two of the most pastoral messages in the Bible. The first, of course, is the 23rd Psalm. But there's a conversation going on between that great psalm and this passage from the Gospel of John, where Jesus speaks as the Good Shepherd who leads us to green pastures and comforts us and restores us and never guides us astray. What makes the 23rd Psalm one of our favorite passages in the Bible? Well, we live in a technological world and we're far removed from shepherds and pastors, yet that rural, natural image that's in the psalm continues to live in the hearts and minds of Jews and Christians all over the world. All of us, in one way or another, are looking for that personal shepherding, so warmly spoken of in the 23rd Psalm. Much of our modern technology is helpful, but not personal. Phone answering machines and voice recordings are practical in getting us messages where we have not heard the phone or answered it. But some people will not cooperate with the process of the technology. Now, why is that? Well, because the technology, as comforting and practical as it sometimes is not personal in quality. It's helpful, but not personal. Two different experiences I have had come to mind. For years, I've been learning my way through the maze of growing changes in the computer world. And sometimes I'd run into a problem on the computer, and I learned that it was indeed helpful to call telephone support for help so that I could move on and solve the problem. In calling several different companies over the years, I find myself always going through the same process. It happens that this is what I encounter over and over again. When I first get a recorded message, it sounds something like this. If you're calling for help with a DeskJet printer, press 1 now. For laser printers, press 2 now. For installation, press 3. For general program features, press 4. For graphics and macros, press 5 now. If you're not sure which kind of help you need, stay on the line and someone will be on to help you. Your generation, my generation, stays on the line because we want to talk to a real person. I've noticed how different people react to automated help processes with businesses. Your generation can't stand it. You're not satisfied until you speak with a real live person. And until you do, you don't feel like you've been helped. The technology and the telephone program is designed to be helpful, but until you actually reach a real person on the other end of the line, it's not personal. A second incident took place years ago in the halls of a local hospital. Have you ever noticed in hospitals that are developing and changing all the time that the halls turn and weave so that a visitor, even a frequent visitor, eventually gets confused about which way to go? Most of the staff people will give you verbal directions, which after a second or a third turn are hard to remember. You wander around passing some of the same landmarks again. You're embarrassed to ask for directions from another person. One week when I was up at Kaiser Hospital in Fontana, that's one of their original facilities and the biggest, I had a rare and wonderful experience with this being lost. Just as I was weaving my way through a new shortcut, there was an orderly patiently guiding an elderly gentleman through the corridors toward the exit, toward the parking lot. Along the way, as I walked up behind them, I could hear the old gentleman asking the orderly, "Where are we? Is this the way I came in? Will I be able to find my way out of the hospital?" I could hear the tension and apprehension in the old man's voice. I could only imagine the circumstance that had brought him to the hospital. Most likely it was his wife who was in the hospital. As they walked slowly through the halls, the younger orderly was calmly assuring the older man that, yes, they would find their way to the front entrance of the hospital. The younger man assured the older one by his presence and his patience. When I caught up with them and recognized where we were, I caught the eye of the young orderly and I offered to guide the older man down to the parking lot. The orderly gave him one last word of assurance, and then he pointed to me and he said, "He knows the way. He will get you safely to your car." Now, as I reflect on the journeys all of us take through life, I see us very much like that old man. Much of what we encounter is puzzling, and sometimes it's confusing to us. We lose our bearings. We're uncertain of the way to go. The 23rd Psalm is a comfort to us because it presents a picture of a gentle, patient God who shepherds us through the sometimes confusing maze of life. As we ask questions, the Good Shepherd speaks to us in a quiet but assuring way, like the young orderly. Whether we hear him or not, the shepherd guides us in the direction that we need to go. Sometimes he does enlist others who know the way to assist in this guiding process. I remember a true story about a missionary who needed to get to a very remote mission station. And the tribal leaders, where he was going, told him that the only way to get there was on foot through days of very dense bush growth. To guide the missionary, they sent him with an old tribal member, telling him, "Just follow this fellow. He knows the way." The missionary looked at his guide, who was dressed simply and only had a walking stick, and he had just a little package of food with him. So the missionary grew nervous. He told the translator to ask the tribal chief, "Where is the old man's map? What if we get lost?" The chief and several others laughed when they heard the missionary's question. The chief pointed again to the guide and said emphatically, "He is the map." And sometimes it's just like that. We're in a quandary. We're in a situation where we're not sure what's next. But God assures us, yeah, there's a map. And sometimes it's a person right there with you. Now let's shift our attention a little bit to what John is telling us about Jesus speaking of himself as this good shepherd. The opening verses remind us of a contrast. Sometimes we don't like it, but we need to think about it. Notice the way Jesus puts it. He says, "I say to you, he who does not enter by the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber." And then he says, "But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he's brought out all of his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow because they know his voice." And then this word that comes to us as a kind of warning. "A stranger they will not follow, but they'll flee from him because they don't know the voice of strangers. There's a part of the world that you and I live in that counts on being able to disguise themselves as your friends, as people who want to guide you the way they want you to go. The cautionary word here in the gospel is, in your heart of hearts, you know when the voice is one from God or one who is trying to lead you astray. So as if to emphasize even more fully what he's talking about, Jesus returns again to the same message. He says, "Truly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not heed them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find safe pasture." And then the reminder again of others seeking to lead you astray. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. And that sacrificial message of Jesus, I came that they might have life and have it more abundantly. One thing that strikes us about Psalm 23 is the assurance that God never leads us in the wrong direction. When Jesus speaks of himself as the Good Shepherd in John 10, he first speaks about those who came before him. It's important for us to know that Jesus is not talking about the great men and women of faith that we see in the pages of the Old Testament. He's not talking about Moses or Elijah or Joshua or Abraham. Instead, Jesus is talking about false shepherds. There's a passage in the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 34, that warns us about false shepherds. They're false leaders in every generation who promise much but deliver little. The clue Jesus gives us in John 10, verse 1, is that these false shepherds always use questionable ways and standards. They don't enter by the main gate. They come in another way. There are two different ways that we can react when we are led astray. One reaction, which is a healthy one, is to immediately learn from our mistake. I'm guessing that all of us have been taken by someone who did not do the proper repairs or rendered some kind of shoddy, incomplete service. Since we are free to choose, and there are many other places to go for help, we generally ask around and find a more trustworthy person to deal with the next time. That's a healthy response. See, we learned from what went wrong. Now there's another way to react, and that's to keep coming back, not discerning that a person is untrustworthy. It's as if this second group refuses to face the truth. This is tragically the case in the followers of Jim Jones and the People's Temple in Guyana. It led to all of their deaths. They followed him up to the end. And so it is with many other cult leaders. There's an old saying that sums up the difference very nicely in how we react to deception. Cheat me once, shame on you. Cheat me twice, shame on me. Sadly, the equivalent of today's mainline church in Jesus' day had led the people astray. They had the trappings of faith, the traditions especially, but they had left the substance of their faith behind. We're not talking about all the Jews, we're talking about the religious authorities. Some people exercise their judgment and discern the difference, and they move on. Others seem to stay in the same place. They're trapped They refuse to listen carefully to the signs and warnings and guidance that they are following. Before you join a parade, look to see how and where the procession is going. That, by the way, was the advice of Will Rogers' father. He knew that his son was a born leader, but he warned him, before you join any movement, see where it's going. You'll most clearly see the change in the attitudes and actions of the leader. Any time of change and restlessness, there are false messiahs who arise and promise to solve everything and lead us out of trouble. They advocate shortcuts that would bypass the law of God. They speak of other ways, especially those who cater and cultivate to our self-interest. It's not in my sermon notes here, I'm particularly distressed by something I heard years ago, that some ministers were saying, well, there's another gospel. Oh, really? You're not content with the gospel? So they were talking about this other gospel. That's a warning. That parade is not headed in the right direction. So when we are led to astray, what is it we need to learn and what is it we need to do? Writer Philip Keller, who himself was a shepherd for a period of time, speaks of the dynamics of a herd of sheep without a shepherd. He says there are always some sheep who are more aggressive in nature than the rest, and they try to move and bully the others in a direction that they want to go. Keller says it's generally an arrogant, cunning, and domineering old ewe who lacks any wisdom and sense of direction and bullies sheep and the herd astray. But when the shepherd finally shows up, the good herd turns its attention away from the bully sheep. Their collective gaze is on the shepherd, in whom they sense security and protection. So thank God when the shepherd shows up. That passage in the later part of the John 10 passage, verses 11 through 16, talks about not heeding the wrong voice. There is a very positive message, and I want to share a personal story that was very moving to me. We can, and we do at our best, listen for the Master's voice. It's in the 4th and 5th verses of John 10. John has some uplifting assurance for us through the words of Jesus that are given here in the opening part of John 10. He speaks of a sheep recognizing the voice of the true shepherd, and that they refuse to follow the voice of a stranger. As Philip Keller says of the sheep, they have a voice imprint of their shepherd that runs deep and abidingly in the very heart of the creatures. They know the voice when they hear it. I'm confident that God has placed within you and I that voice imprint of his Son, Jesus. There's something distinctive about the voice of Christ that reaches down within us. It speaks to us above the confusion and roar of other voices that compete for our attention and loyalty. I'm reminded of the old RCA Victrola symbol of more than half a century. And the youngest among you probably are not aware of this, but the rest of you remember it distinctly. It's a picture of a dog with his ear turned attentively toward a horn-shaped Victrola speaker. Underneath are these words, and I bet you could say them: listening to his master's voice. I first saw it in my Uncle Rodney Wignall's television shop on C Street in Oxnard. He had a 3-foot-tall replica of the RCA dog, and the slogan in his shop, And that image has remained with me 65 years later. But over the years, the meaning of that symbol for me has changed. Years ago, it was just a charming reminder of the loyalty of dogs and how they tune in to the voice of their master, in much the same way as our family dog Gypsy did whenever my father spoke to him. He was tuned in to my dad's voice. But as my faith deepened, it became more than a cute or charming symbol. It became a reminder that we need to tune in to our Lord's voice so that we're not led astray. I think of the detours that I allowed my mind to take, when and where I got off track from time to time in my journey through life. And I close with this story. I'm still just awestruck by it. 23 years ago, almost to today's date, I attended the funeral of a cousin up in Pomona, California. Many of our family are buried there. Jim Troby was a man with a great love of baseball. He made it into the minor leagues and he played for the Pittsburgh Pirate organization. I remember Jim asking me and other cousins to pitch baseballs to him. He was scouting us as kids to see what kind of talent we might have. And he caught all of our pitches bare-handed. That impressed us as kids. In the last years of his life, Jim developed serious emphysema and had greater and greater trouble breathing. What I remember about that funeral was how his son, Sam Troby, led his father to saving faith in Christ and give him comfort and assurance in the last years of Jim's life. It was a very simple, direct way. Sam shared with his father the promises that are there in Scripture. He referred to the highway of salvation in Romans chapter 10 and the comforting words of Jesus in John 14. He didn't lecture or pressure his father. He simply presented the clear, simple truth and let the master speak for himself. His father received Christ and died with a calm assurance of where he was going. What struck me so much at that service for Jim was how God sometimes uses others' voices to be that imprint and reminder that guides us back to God. Thank God that when our voice becomes used by the Master, that if we know Christ and trust Him, we can be a great comfort and assurance to others. Thanks be to God that Jesus' voice is clear and that by the grace of God, we'll continue to hear it above all the other voices clamoring for our attention. Amen.